adult friendships have always been fucking hard. So when you add a global pandemic on top of that, they almost feel unreachable, right? And that's such a difficult thing as a human being to navigate what is already the landscape of a pandemic world. I can't even say post-pandemic because we're still within the midst of it.
Welcome to the place where we hear empowering stories of transformation and then we turn that into art that reminds us to be great. I am your host and artist, Jessica James, and this is the I Empower Podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you today. Thank you, Sabrina, for being on with me today. I'm excited to talk with you and share your incredible story and all of the great things that you're doing. I always like to tell my listeners where I find my guest. And a fun fact, we met on Clubhouse during the pandemic. And we chatted, and you were talking about some career changes and also your comedy that you do and going to the comedy clubs. And I don't know what the skits, I don't know what the proper, I don't want to do you any injustice on what that the proper name for that is. But then we decided to follow each other on Instagram, and we followed each other for a while, and then one day you just like in my DMs was like, I think we need to be friends, like for real, like outside of the internet, we need to be friends. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so weird because, you know, adult friendships are hard and sometimes you just have to like take that step and almost like just go for it. And so we decided to have brunch, and here we are now. Our friendship is blossoming, and I love every minute of it. But I want to just have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what it is that you do. And so I'm going to hand the mic over to you.
Oh, thank you. A hot mic. I'm so honored. So yes, my name is Sabrina, and that is 100% correct of how we met. It's one of those internet meet cutes that don't end up in dismemberment. So that's always a good sign of a good friendship. Right. So I, by day, am a project manager, and by evening, from time to time, I can be found on stage doing stand-up. I do a bit of writing. I also have a podcast called Solving the Friendemic, which I think we'll dig a little bit deeper into. I'm a wife. I'm a sister to a brother who has an 11-year age difference with me. So I think that's pretty a fun fact. Same parents, just something in the water when we moved to North Carolina. I'm a Miami, Florida native, but I am a country girl through marriage, and I have a really good person to cow ratio near my house. So a little bit about me.
Yeah, so exciting. And I wanted to have you on because I love the podcast that you're doing. I think it's such a great concept, and every time I turn on an episode, I'm immediately like, my cheeks start hurting from the beginning. You guys are so great and so relatable and so funny. And it just really feels like you're sitting down and a part of the conversation. So Solving the Friendemic, tell me where that came from. Where did that idea come from, and what's making you want to do this?
Yeah. So I first have to shout out a different podcast called Dungeons and Daddies. And Holly, my co-host, I have two. I have the amazing Holly and the magical Kristen. And the three of us are really what Solving the Friendemic is. But Holly had told me about this podcast called Dungeons and Daddies. And it's basically a D&D roleplay podcast. And it was just drop dead hilarious. And the more I listened to it and the more I got into the story, I was like, we should do something like this, but not necessarily D&D based, even though personally my tiefling was ready to go into battle. She's a druid and she's fantastic. She's just not on air ready. And I knew I was always fascinated with podcasts because I love the D&D podcast. I love true crime, but I never could picture myself in those genres. I always kind of felt like that Brene Brown pool of like, if I do something and I put something out there with my name on it, it has to be authentic and it has to be something from within myself. And so I think we went to get Mexican food after Christmas, and we were just talking, and I was like, oh, Kristen, you started listening to Dungeons and Daddies. Cool, cool, cool. Why don't we do a podcast? And I think at first, like, we all laughed about it, and we're like, oh, that could be kind of cool. And I was like, no, like, I think we really should do this. Like, I think the three of us are really freaking funny. And I know, like, if you don't know me, this is going to sound so self-absorbed, but that was my pitch. That was my pitch.
We're so great. Yeah.
Hilarious. And that, you know, we were all navigating different phases of our lives. Like, I knew that I was going to be transitioning out of my job. Kristen has left the medical field and now she's in the cosmetology field. Holly's teaching, but she started a crochet business as well. And there's just like a lot of change going on in life. And so much of my life, a lot of the choices that I make are kind of dictated by the ring the big bell method, is what I call it. And basically that's inspired by Daria, the show that used to be on the N. And my mom and I used to watch it all the time, along with Buffy. And there's an episode that they go to tour colleges, and Jody's dad is talking to Daria, and he's like, Daria, you know, you just need to ring the big bell, which basically means go for it. And for me, I've just really strived to have this mentality that aligns with that, and like the advice my mom has always given me through the show Daria, because it's so true, right? Like, the worst thing that happens when we go for something is that someone or something causes it to be a no, which just causes us to look in a different direction to see what that next thing is. So for me, the podcast was ringing the big bell in that moment. And there's ring the big bell moments all throughout the day, right? It's not this one catalyst of a thing. It can lead to amazing things, but ringing the big bell can also be picking up my contacts because they've come in and fighting against anxiety, right? Whereas ringing the big bell can be these huge decisions. And so we decided that we would meet at a coffee shop and we would talk about what does a podcast really look like. And we had kind of flirted with the idea at Holly's house of like, oh, we could do something that we face our fears, because we all have very unique fears. Like, I'm afraid of elderly people. And
oh, wow.
My friend Kristen's afraid of chickens. And, oh God, Holly, if I get this wrong, please don't hate me. I think she's afraid of snakes, but I could be wrong about that. But we all have very unique fears that we think would be interesting to face. But then we thought, oh, maybe like that can't be our whole podcast idea. Maybe it's not like a fear factor. Maybe there's another layer to it. And then we talked about, well, what if we challenge ourselves to do things that take us out of our comfort zone? I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. And then when we built up on that and we just got to talking, we all just started talking about friendship. And then we had all been brainstorming. And then finally, I was talking to my mom and it kind of hit me, like, adult friendships. Oh, wait, I guess I should ask, am I allowed to curse on this podcast? Oh,
yeah, of course.
Okay. I've heard other ones, but the ones that I've heard, I hadn't heard a lot of cursing, and I was like, oh my God, they're going to cancel me. They're going to be like, we can't even air it, guys. It's over.
Yeah, no. No, you're good.
Okay. I was like, I need to make you promise.
I feel like I need to like put that in the welcome letter. Like, please feel free to drop F-bombs. Like, you know, because that's like, it's my favorite cuss word. I think we had this conversation at brunch the other day.
Well, you know, adult friendships have always been fucking hard. So when you add a global pandemic on top of that, they almost feel unreachable, right? And that's such a difficult thing as a human being to navigate what is already the landscape of a pandemic world. I can't even say post-pandemic because we're still within the midst of it. And nobody can quite see what that exit looks like. And so as we navigate that, as we navigate those big feelings, how are we supposed to connect with people? The world has changed so much since prior to the pandemic. So that's where the name Solving the Friendemic comes in, because friendships have changed and they're just as difficult as ever. So how the hell do we navigate them? And that's really where that name comes from. That's how the conversation sparked. And I'm really proud of it. I mean, we can't put like a ton of money into it. And I'm going to give like eye lock to my girl Holly, because she's really been the one like financially supporting it. And so has Kristen, because I was going through such a big job transition at the time that really the only thing that I was putting in was sweat equity, which I don't want to say the only thing, because they've never made me feel like, oh, Sabrina, we're putting in the money, like you're just doing these things. But they've just always been so supportive. And I think the biggest thing we talk about on the podcast, and the biggest thing that I can like let people know today, is communication is so important. Like, I think that is what I've learned both on the podcast while we're recording and off the podcast, is that when you're able to share those vulnerable truths and you're able to come together in a bare space and be able to really get deep into things, that's how creativity and magic happen. That's where that shows up. Because when you come in with all of these walls or embarrassment or shame around things that shouldn't be shameful, they should just be conversation. They should be just, hey, this is a boundary I have, or this is something I'm struggling with, or I'm feeling these kinds of feelings around this. Let's talk about it so that we can feel like we're on the same ground, so we can feel like we're going towards the same place. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have so many like points that I want to like touch on, and I'm like, how do I want to make sure I get them all in and not do a 2-hour long episode, but oh my God. Because, adult friendships are fucking hard. And, it's getting older anyways. Like, I have these moments where I'm like, oh my God, I'm 35. And like, I don't know, like I remember being, a young teenager and looking at 30-year-olds and thinking that was old. And then now I'm like, that's not old. Like, I don't feel old, but like, I feel like I should be feeling like I'm old. However, growing up, it was easier for us to have friendships. I mean, you could go to a park, and I watched my oldest kid like literally like walk up to a kid and be like, hey, let's do this. And then they're friends the whole entire like time that we're there. And it's just crazy to me. Why do you think that is when we get older? The reason why we are so much reserved, or why in general that friendships as adults are hard?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we just wrap ourselves in all of the shame and anxieties and even the to-do of everyday life, right? Like, we start to mind fuck ourselves in a way of like, oh, I don't really need to get drinks with this person. I really don't need to go do this thing because they think XYZ. Like, you start to play mind games on yourself, and you start to think, oh, they don't really like me. Or they're only talking to me because we did that report once. They have nothing in common with me. But we won't actually open ourselves to a place of vulnerability to know if there is common ground. And we get so stuck also when we don't go outside of our comfort zone too. Because if we're only meeting people at work, then so much conversation is going to be around work. And then you also have to be worried about boundaries being intertangled, right? You want to be so careful that, and not to say you can't have work friends. One of my best friends is a former boss of mine, and I love her, Jen. The shout out is to you. But of course, like, you have to be able to have boundaries. And if that is something that you're working on, because God knows I'm still working on them, we're all working on them. It would be easier to start with friendships that are outside of a place that you have to go to, right? So if you challenge yourself to go to somewhere that brings you joy, like maybe you enjoy comics, maybe you enjoy video games, maybe you're a coffee enthusiast, and you start placing yourself in places that people could have those shared interests to discuss with you, it's scary. It's vulnerable, and it's putting yourself out there. And then let's say you do it. Well, hell, now I'm here. What am I supposed to do? Like, people are looking at me. They know I don't belong here. And there's a lot of imposter syndrome that we're having to wade through. And I think with kids, we don't have as much trauma around that unless you've gone through bullying. And that's actually one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast as well, is because not even just as an adult, but as a child, it was so hard for me to make friends. And some of that I attribute to being a frustrated internal Gen Xer, because my parents are Gen X and they raised me very Gen X. And I know when people hear that, they're like, what the hell does she mean? But it's like, I watched Gem and the Holograms. I watched She-Ra. I watched Buffy. I watched all of these things, and it was around pop culture that my parents were exposing me to. And also, they're huge nerds. My mom worked at a comic book shop. My dad was a regular there. So, like, I had no choice but to be a nerd. And so my interests weren't always as congruent as the others when I was growing up. And then my parents always wanted me to have access to what they consider to be the best, right? And that's what every parent wants, I assume. I'm not a mother. Hashtag not a mom. But, my assumption based on conversation is, that that's what they're hoping for. And by exposing me to things that they went through as they were younger, they're thinking, okay, she's going to grow from this, and then she's going to gain these experiences and blah, 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 blah. Well, my mom and dad had me kind of young. And my mom went to Catholic school. So, like, by proxy, she wanted to send me to Catholic school. We had two very different Catholic school experiences. Her parents were very affluent. It was different times. It was just very different. Whereas with my parents, like, they were younger, they were getting their family started, they were working for their dream, like, they had just gotten a house, and like, those were the big things. They weren't in the same financial bracket, and unfortunately, at Catholic school, everyone's aware of that, down to the kids.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was struggling with UTIs, and so I would kind of smell weird and things like that. So all of those things together is just a recipe of otherness. And I think when kids don't get that, when they are able to kind of blend in, or there's not that otherness that's so quickly found, it's a lot easier for them to form those connections unbiasedly. So I think it depends on the kid too. I think everyone's navigating friendship on their own plane.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think, I think back to myself. I think too that a lot of times, like things that happen in your life, circumstantial, I'll get it in a second, can change who you are. I think back to myself in high school and middle school. I was very outgoing. I felt like I was everybody's friend. I feel like I was a part of the popular kids group, but it didn't feel like it was this like constant thing that I felt like I had to be popular and liked by everybody. I just wanted to like everybody. And so, I feel like that was a thing. And it eventually like led into, junior, senior year. I didn't like the way the crowd that I was hanging out with was acting. And so I almost kind of like dismembered myself from that, just because I wanted to be such this like loving, caring person. I wanted to be friends to everybody. I didn't want to be mean. And not saying that all popular cliques are mean like you see in the movies. I don't remember our clique being like that, but then as I got older and, I didn't go to college. I entered, the work field. Immediately I started working and developed friendships through work. And I still felt like I carried that sense of outgoingness. But then, the older that I got and the things that I went through in my own life, I feel like I slowly transitioned into like an introvert. So like was extrovert. And now I've transitioned to being an introvert. And so now it's really hard for me to talk to people. I mean, and especially now because I don't work with the public, so I'm not in a space where I have to communicate with people verbally, face to face every day. Like, I feel like I can be a great friend online. We can talk and have a great conversation, but if I have to like sit in front of you and talk about things, it's a whole different experience. So for me, I think some, traumas and then just life experiences and circumstances of my environment has changed that for me. It was like, it makes me think last night we had the pool that we're members of had a ladies' night event. And I was like, that sounds like fun. Last week I was like, that sounds like fun. I should go do that and hang out with people. And then the day comes, like yesterday, I'm like, I'm talking to my husband and I'm like, I don't know, like, that it's from 8 to 10. It's kind of late. I haven't really seen you the past couple days because you've been working a lot. And I really just kind of want to like lay in the bed and watch Stranger Things with you. And he was like, I really think you should just go and talk to people, like just get out of the house. You spend way too much time in the house. And so I like forced myself, and it was uncomfortable. It was an uncomfortable, like, I can sit and talk about other people and what they are doing and things like that. But when they start asking me questions about myself, it's like all I can do to keep from shutting down. It's so hard. And so I am glad that I had that experience and that I went out. But where I'm getting with this is I think the pandemic definitely changed me. I almost feel like I have a slight agoraphobia. I don't want to go outside. I don't want to leave the house. My house is my safe space. So like, I don't want to leave.
Yeah, even to that point, I think it's fascinating taking a Myers-Briggs test post-pandemic and seeing how you've changed. Two of my
Yeah.
letters changed. Now I'm still an extrovert, but oh man, now I can't remember what it was. But I used to be ENFP, and I think
Mm-hmm.
now I'm EINT. No, I'm sorry. I used to be ENFJ, and now I'm EINP, I think, with a dash T or something like that. But I was so surprised because I've always felt so secure in what my Myers-Briggs type was. But I think
Oh,
that's the thing that is interesting with the pandemic and with life is that over life, we change. That's a given. The only constant in life is that there is change. So then when a pandemic comes in, all that does is accelerates time in a way, right? It just
yeah.
accelerates those changes because we are in a constant place of unknowing or navigating new policies or changes or going back to the way things were and things like that. And it's nice to see positive steps being taken. But of course, it's nerve wracking too, because we have been in this survival mode. And whether
Yeah.
it's in our personal lives, in our professional lives, or all of the above, it's taxing and exhausting. And even if you're not seeing the physical effects, there are internal effects. And I don't mean just contracting the virus. I mean, because that in itself is hell and
Yeah.
horrific and not okay. But then for those who haven't been touched for the virus or they have been touched, but they were able to recover, there are still as a society things that we're going to be healing from. And we're going to look different. And we're going to have
Yeah.
some scratches or we're going to have something noticeable. And it may not seem noticeable on the surface level, but on that internal, as we navigate life and we make choices and we figure out who we are, because I think we keep learning about ourselves until the day we die. Well, that might be very optimistic of me, but I believe that. And I think that's amazing. And I think sometimes we take for granted who we think that we are, and we make these choices that really are not congruent with the person we're becoming. And
Yeah.
that is something that I want to urge people is even within friendship or externally outside of friendship, when you think about next steps or you're accepting invitations from people or you're accepting different things, be intentional and mindful in those moments. Is this the person I want to be in the future? And it's not always black or white. Like, I think we always are in that grayscale of like, if I hang out with this person, like, is this someone I see myself growing a close friendship with? Or is this like my movie theater friend and I call up so we can watch the new movie that's dropping? And I
Right.
think that's appropriate. And I think those roles shift too, not just internally, but within our friendships. We talked about that on the podcast. We were discussing sometimes friendships are in different labels and boxes, and that's okay. The only thing is, you don't want to write that label in Sharpie. Like, you got to be able to dry erase it and know that sometimes your bestest friend is not who needs to be your bestest friend right now. They kind of need to be in the movie theater category. There's not a
Yeah.
healthy friendship for you. But sometimes that person who you sit at the roller skating park with um, is now actually your best friend because you had a vulnerable moment and you were able to talk to them a little bit deeper than you usually would, or maybe it's that cashier at the grocery store and you had no idea that there's a lifelong friendship there. So I
Yeah.
think that's the thing, is we just have to remain open to ourselves and those around us and the energy that this world puts out, because we create art within our everyday life through the energy that we wield and the energy we take in. And we can create a beautiful life. And I know, it kind of sounds like, what is she selling? What, like, do not piss on me and tell me that it's raining. I'm on a journey too. I have anxiety and depression, and I'm recovering from an eating disorder. And every day is not magic bunnies and rainbows. Sometimes it's bunny shit and storm clouds. But we
Yeah.
get to the bunnies and rainbows by living through those moments. And that, I think, is so imperative, is holding space for those moments that feel the darkest or the scariest, because flowers have to be watered to grow. And when we start to view ourselves as something precious, as a flower that we love, and we're putting in that work, and we matter to ourselves, people will bloom around us. But the more that we put ourselves down and we isolate and we don't take care of the flowers, right? Nothing will grow, nothing will yield. That soil will be dead because there's no care.
Yeah.
So,
Hello, beautiful. I just wanted to pop in here really quick and remind you that if you love what you're hearing and you want to hear more of it, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss next week's episode of I Empower. And if you're feeling extra generous and you would like to give us a review, we would greatly appreciate it. Those help bump us in the algorithm so that more people are able to find these empowering stories to help them. Also, don't forget to check out the art that goes along with today's episode. You can do so at iempower.club or on Instagram at iempowerclub. And if you personally feel connected to the story and the art and you would like to purchase a limited edition print that goes along with it, you can do so on our website. As a reminder, all of the art sales go to support the podcast and help us continue this mission each week of bringing you empowering stories. All right, back to the show. I love that. I wanted to touch back to, I listened to one of you guys' podcasts recently where you talked about losing friendships during the pandemic. And that one really resonated with me, which is also tying into what you're talking about with change and not being afraid to have change. And I think that that's probably one of the scariest things that most people don't want to happen is change. We get into our routines and the things we know. We wake up every day, it's going to be this and that. And I think, with the pandemic, there was so much change. I honestly feel like it's safe to say that we have all had some sort of traumatic response because of this that we went through. Like, our whole entire lives were uprooted and changed. And, I don't think it will ever be the way that it was. It may on a surface level, but like you said, there was a change that happened in all of us. And it made me realize that I had a lot of friends of convenience, which was a situation that a lot of people face when they have friendships at work, and then, either they leave that position or their friend leaves that position, and then you think that that's like your really good friend and you're never going to lose that relationship, but it just trickles off because of life or, the reality of it being a friend of convenience. And I think that for me, I experienced that, and I didn't realize that that's what it was until it happened, and that friendship just fizzled out, or I don't even know what happened to it. I got ghosted, I guess. I don't know. But it was really hard for me because I valued that friendship. I thought that that was such a strong core friendship, and I don't know what happened to it. And so dealing with that change and dealing with the fact that the pandemic brought out a lot in all of us, and maybe friendships and belief systems or whatever it is that you want to call it. I don't even really know how to put a label on it, but you just realize that that friendship's just not for you anymore. And so I just wanted to highlight that episode because it really helped me say it is okay to lose those friendships, and it is okay to grow and change. And so I just think that that's a beautiful thing you guys talked about.
Thank you. And that means so much to me because that is a big part of why we do what we do is we want to normalize things that we don't talk about. And I think we actually attack shame, and attack's kind of a strong word, but we're able to open conversation to shame, and we're able to open conversation towards healing and growth and what people's goals look like when we acknowledge what's really happening. Because I think, especially in society, we're looked at as people who could be hysterical or highly sensitive, or especially if you have a lot of like attachment to friendship, that can be difficult to navigate when you feel like other people aren't. And the reality is everybody has friend problems. Everybody has difficult relationships that they're navigating. We just don't talk about it. And when you don't talk about it, that's what makes it feel so taboo and icky. So that makes me so happy that you listened to the episode and that it made you feel validated. That's the hope.
Yes. Yeah. It was so great. Like, I felt so great after listening to it. I was like, that's right. I'm not, and it just made me feel like you said, like I'm not the only one that experienced that. And I think that that's important, but also realizing that everything, works its way out the way it's supposed to be. And there may be like some really new great friends that I haven't met yet that are going to love me, and and I'm going to love them and all the good things. So yeah, I think that that's, I don't know. I seen a quote the other day that said, you have yet to meet all the people that are going to love you, I think is the way it was worded. And I was like, that's so interesting, like to think about it that way.
100%.
A lot of us, we just kind of like live in the now. We live in the now, and we think this is it right now. And so it's just nice to know that I have this much extra time in my life, and there are going to be more people that are going to come into it and make an impact, and hopefully I make an impact into their life as well. So.
And I think that's why pictures are so important, even though I don't like taking pictures most of the time. Like, even being on camera right now, I'm like, pictures, I think, tell a story of our journey. And even if there are friends who are not beside us at this time, for whatever the circumstance may be, even if it ended the most bitter way that friendships could end, I really think it's important to recognize time that person did show up in your life for a period of time, and to honor that. Now, does honoring look like calling them up and being like, let's rekindle this friendship after you called me a cunt? No, maybe not.
Right.
Maybe that's not where we're at with that, unless that's your personal journey calling you and being like, hey girl, why don't you call so-and-so up? Like, if you feel internally you want to bridge that friendship, great. That's on you. Please do not come back to me and tell me, oh my God, I did what you said and it went horrifically. And now I have to buy a dictionary because I don't even understand what this person was calling me by the end of it. I had to go on Urban Dictionary. But I think it's so important to look back on that journey, not just to honor the friendship, because I do think that's important, but to honor yourself, because you're not the same damn person that you were when you were friends with this person at 15 than who you were in your 20s and who you are in your 30s. You evolve, and sometimes your friendships evolve too, and sometimes you grow together, and that's amazing and wonderful and fantastic, and sometimes you don't, and you're just not the right people for each other anymore. And that, we wanted to be so careful on the podcast because it wasn't going to be like a step-by-step of how do you break up a friend, because that's a lot of liability. Like that's
I was going to ask you that.
No,
oh my goodness.
See, that was the thing. Like, we had chatted about the idea of it, and we all kind of were in a place of like, we're not professionals, and like you'll always see that in our little warning box, like, we're not professionals. This is a comedy podcast that we are giving our opinion, and if you choose to use our opinion, that is all it is. There's no scientific research. There's no degree backing that. Like, my master's is higher education. It is not friendship. It is not therapy.
Psychology.
If you want to see Otero about therapy, her name's Cassie Otero. That's my mother. She's the therapist. That's the Otero you want to go to. I'm the Otero you want to talk to if you want to slam down a cocktail and laugh for the night. Like, that's
right. Yeah.
But yeah, I think so much of what we've been discussing though is so wrapped in that imposter syndrome, right? Like, we get so paralyzed by step one of like the analysis paralysis in our head, that we're going through every single different thing that this could happen, right? And I think for some anxiety, sure, go through the worst case scenario. I go up to this person and I instantly combust into a ball of fiery flames. That could happen. And then I think, well, if I'm already going to be on fire, I guess it doesn't matter if I'm talking to this person or I'm going to be on fire on the side here. So I might as well go talk to this person before I get lit into a ball of fire, which doesn't happen, but my anxiety is telling me it's going to happen. And so I think being able to reframe that, what is the real worst case scenario? Is it that this person's going to think I'm weird? Well, I might already think I'm weird by me being quiet in this corner. Or they're gonna think that I'm too loud. Okay, I'm really loud on Facebook and the internet. Like, that's not news. I'm Cuban and Italian. I have no choice but to be loud. If I was quiet, I wouldn't really be me. You know, and it's kind of going against all of those anxieties, because why? And I don't have the answer to why, but I'm just saying, why is it that I sit here and I start ditching every person that could potentially be a friend in my head because I've decided that I'm not valuable enough to be a friend? Everybody's just another person. They're just people. Like, they're not gods, but anxiety tricks us. Imposter syndrome tricks us, and it makes us think you're less than. Here's your previous trauma. Let's wrap all of these feelings that you got inside, and instead of unwrapping them into this beautiful string, we're just going to take them all and make one big ball of yarn out of all of these multicolored colors, instead of being able to separate it out and be like, you know what? I am worthy. I am good. And being able to accept the rejection that if someone does not want to be my friend and they don't like me for whatever the hell reason, I have to be able to get to the point that I say, oh, wow. Instead of thinking and sitting there and being like, well, what did I do? Did I smile too big? Was I too much at first? Did my food suck? Like, what was it? Like, what's the magic formula to friendship? And I think that's the biggest thing. And probably the biggest disappointment of you on my podcast with my friends is we don't have the magic formula. We're just sharing our experiences, and we're sharing and modeling friendship so that when you listen, you know that you're the fourth friend in the room. I want, when you put those headphones on or you have it playing in your car, that you feel like you're in the conversation, that you feel like, oh my God, these girls are fucking funny and I'm funny too. And now I've played a board game with them. I can go do this with another friend. I want your mirror neurons to be going off like this so that you feel empowered, that you can be like, fuck it, I'm going to host a game night, or I'm going to go out and throw some axes, or I'm going to practice some self-care with some buddies, or I'm going to watch Kid Nation because that shit sounded crazy. Like, it really is a springboard so that you feel secure, that you do have a place to come back to. And, you know, and we try to be more interactive. I mean, we're still building our Facebook and our Instagram following, but as people want to talk to us, hell, come on there. We'll talk to people. We'll have conversation. We are friends, you know, in a parasocial way, because of course I'm not going to meet a stranger off the internet. Wink, wink, Jessica. And I think that's the scariest part, right? Is like telling people, oh yeah, we met on the internet, but like she promised she was from my area, so it's fine. And
it was totally fine.
I think that's the big thing, is like, before you meet someone on the internet, make sure to see all of their socials and see if they actually post videos of themselves.
Yeah, make sure they're
like, hey. But that's what a thing I've been doing.
Well, I think it helped that like we met on Clubhouse and like we were talking, and so it was like, you know, that I was at least a real person. Now, whether or not I was a weirdo, like, you know, I don't know, which I think I am a weirdo, so, but that's okay.
That's a requirement to be friends with me, is to be a weirdo. But that's been a thing that I've been doing this year, is I want to be around badass people that are thinking outside of the box and doing the damn thing. And because that's what I envision my higher self, is going after the big things, doing things that aren't usual. And it's hard to do that if you're not surrounding yourself with people that are doing that too. Now, does that mean that you have to have a fucking website or a merch launch to be my friend? Yes. No. But yes, you must be.
You must be. I have a criteria list that you have to check off.
Gotta like and smash that subscribe button. No, but I reached out to you, and then I reached out to One Crafty Miss and other people that I just felt I hadn't met them in person, but I knew they were around locally and they were doing badass things, and I felt like we would have personal interest, even if we never talked business, even if we never talked about those things. I think being around people that inspire you is how you can become inspirational yourself, is because you're taking the time to learn that wisdom, and you're taking the time to learn about, okay, these are just people too. They started being just person. They're still just a person, like, but they're doing something that brings them joy. And for me, success at the end of the day is not how much money, not how many followers, not how many this, not how many that, even though it's cool. And I think that's an accomplishment and it's to be celebrated. For me, success is that somebody's going to wake up and be like, fuck, I'm glad I'm living my life today. And that's not to count on anybody with mental illness, because look, you're bitch. Like, again, sometimes it's rabbit shit and storm clouds, but it's finding powerful people. It's finding people who are standing in their truth, and it's finding people who are committed to growth that has made such a difference.
Yeah. I think that's such an important thing to say too, because I've said this quote a million times and I still cannot remember the guy's name. Like one day I just need to like put it up on my wall or whatever so that I don't misquote this person, but and you may know who I'm talking about. The quote's like, you are the, average of your 5 closest friends.
Oh, yeah.
And so who you surround yourself with, is important, because if you are wanting certain things out of life, we'll just say growth, if you're wanting growth and, to be somebody that you're not right now, if you're not surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded and doing the same things, it's going to be harder for you to really stay focused in your goals. And, not saying that you should not be friends with those people, but I think the people that you spend the most time with are the ones that need to be a reflection of who you want to see yourself, which is, what you mentioned earlier. So I think that's a beautiful thing to say. And not being afraid to lose friends along the way. There are people that were in my life that I used to get really bent out of shape about because they never would text me, or I always felt like I was putting in that energy to see them and they weren't doing it back. And I'm all like, why don't they want to be my friend? And, you just have to realize, you sit back and you analyze, like, what does this friendship mean to me? Is it making me grow? If it's not, just let it go, type thing, which can be hard. I get it. We all feel like we want to have friends and be liked by everybody. I think it's safe to say that.
I think that's a big piece of friendship trauma too, is that once we do make a friend, especially if you had severe bullying, now I cannot speak, I'm not the spokesperson for everybody who's been bullied. I'm not the spokesperson for everyone who's ever wanted to make a friend. I'm only speaking about my own journey. I always feel the need to be like, disclaimer, jazz hands.
Yeah.
Please don't come back at me. Please do not get angry with me. But it is the internet.
Well, Sabrina said this.
Well, it's impossible not to be angry at someone on the internet. So, but that's a big piece, I think, with friendship trauma, is that once we make a friend, then we start to think, oh shit, they're going to know that I'm actually not cool enough to be their friend. And now I have to overcompensate and overcompensate and overcompensate. And the other person's not asking for that. Like, they're not being gaslighters. I mean, they might be, and that's a whole other separate issue. But for me, something that I've caught is that I will go through these periods of time that I'm overextending myself and doing things that aren't healthy, that aren't within my boundaries, that are not serving who I'm supposed to be in the future. And it's not like you've got to look at every step and be like, well, drinking water is going to be great for my future self. But then you look down and you're like, be a dick to Paul. Okay, that's great for my future self. No, but I mean, we're all human. And I think that's the big thing here, is that if you've been through severe bullying, if you've been through that otherness or that feeling of I don't belong, and then you finally make a friend, you cling because you're so scared. And then that's what could lead to the downfall of that friendship. And thus begins the cycle again of I have no friends. I'm unlovable. I don't deserve friendships. And it goes into this whole devolving narrative. And then this person somewhat likes me. They think I'm interesting. I want to keep them interested. How do I do that? Now we're love bombing people. Now we're giving them gifts, or we're trying to be all of these things that we're not, or we shouldn't be. And then they're gone. And that's a hard thing, is recognizing that cycle and being able to be like, oh, maybe it is me. Like, and that's hard, because the initial trauma is not you, but how you react to the trauma is. And it's fucking hard to talk about, because there's a lot of shame and anger wrapped in that. And I remember in college, that was the hardest thing, is like, I'm not being monitored by my parents. Not that they were like over my shoulder. They were never helicopter parents, but it's like you're on your own. You're living on your own. You're making all these decisions yourself. Like, you can eat a bag of Oreos and get sick and no one's going to tell you anything because they don't know. But it's like the bigger things too, of like, you're living with someone or you're making these friendships. And I remember telling my RA, just sobbing and being like, I don't have any friends. And she's like, but then who's this person that's standing outside this dorm to make sure you're okay?
Yeah.
And I clicked in my head, I'm like, oh my God, that person's my friend. Like, I felt they hated me, because I've started to believe this inner dialogue in my head that they hate me. And it could be, the John Mulaney advice, like, does someone really hate me, or have I not drank water in a week and not slept, right? Because college will do that. And like, I think it's a mixture of those things, right? It's a mixture of being a product of the environment that we're in and the high stress, and we're moving out of home, and it's a lot going on. But then with friendship trauma, like, it becomes a whole other layer. And I think being a woman of color, moving from somewhere like Miami, Florida, where everywhere I turned, everyone was Cuban. And I already felt othered in that segment because I don't speak Spanish. And so that's like a huge thing in Spanish culture, is being able to speak the language, and you almost feel like a fraud or othered or like a borderline kind of person. Like, I'm not quite here, but I'm perceived as this all the time, but I can't actually act in the way that would put me on this level. So I'm already not valuable enough within my own culture, which no one's told me that. It's just the way that I have felt. Then I moved to the South, where there's not a lot of Cubans. I mean, there's a Facebook page. There might be 200 people on it. It's a lot of people in North Carolina. You're not just turning around and seeing a Cuban over your shoulder like you do in Florida. And even the culture is different. Like, when you go up to someone, you don't kiss someone on the cheeks like you do in Florida.
Right.
You don't speak to somebody and be like, no, and go fuck your son. And also, here's the Dawn soap, my baby. I love you so much. All right, give me the cash. Now you stay great, you donkey ass. Like, it's not like the way you speak in Spanish to people, because I can understand it, I just don't speak it back, is so much like mi amorcito, very romantic language. Whereas in the South, it feels so dry. And now I've been here longer. I've lived in the South 15 years. And I feel like I'm like this fun hybrid, right? Because I can't just get rid of my Cuban DNA, but then I also now have all of the Southernisms and bless your hearts and these things. Like, I say y'all, and I don't mean it ironically. I say it in my everyday vernacular. So it's interesting when somebody is bouncing all of these otherness kind of feelings. And that was the hardest thing, was like, when we moved here, I got really into theater. I'd never done theater before, and it was going great. And then suddenly I wasn't getting cast in things, and like, people were talking and all of these things, and come to find out it's because I don't have the right coloring. And that whole I don't have the right coloring for the community theater thing came up because young guys were taking interest in me as a young girl. And because I'm Hispanic, I must be super sexual, or I must be scandalous, or I must be XYZ. I wasn't. I was barely hitting puberty. I was 12 or 13. I didn't have those feelings. I mean, everybody has horny. Well, I don't want to say that. It's okay to have sexual feelings. That's not what I mean. But like, I wasn't going around and doing things to get that reputation. It was simply happening to me because of the way I looked, because of the way my last name sounded, because in the summer I get a little bit darker, because I don't hide that I have Cuban. And my parents do speak Spanish. Damn, my 14-year-old brother's fluent. Like, and he was born and raised in the South, so it's like the complete opposite. But it's jarring. It's jarring for the labels we create for ourselves. But why are we spending the time othering ourselves and having imposter syndrome and putting labels on ourselves when the world's already doing it for us? We don't need to ridicule. We don't need to put ourselves down, because we need to be busy breaking the labels people are creating for us and stigmatizing us with, because we deserve better. So I say fuck imposter syndrome. I mean, hell, I had it this morning. When you had asked me originally, I was looking through the podcast again. I'm like, Jessica, you've had therapists on here. You've had people with degrees. You've had people that know things and whether or not they had a degree or not, you've had people that are more in touch with themselves than I am with myself. I'm 25. I can't sit here and claim to have the answers of the world, whether it be friendship related or anything else. But what I can sit down and claim is that I'm a broken person. I'm someone recovering from an eating disorder. I'm somebody recovering from friendship trauma. I'm somebody recovering from trauma and PTSD and things that we don't talk about enough. But I'm also somebody who really loves, and I'm somebody who had an idea. And in response to the theater thing, I started my own theater group called the League of Extraordinary Thespians, because I said, fuck it. I said, fuck community theater if they're going to treat me like this. And we put on Dr. Horrible Sing-Along Blog. And then we wrote a musical on The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And we did big shit. I had to talk to Nintendo about it. I had to organize things. And that's what led me to my bachelor's, because I knew I loved helping people. That's why I wanted to do nonprofit kind of work or have those kinds of skills. And so why I'm here and why I said yes is because at the end of the day, I just want to encourage people, if you don't fit in the box, and this is not my own personal idea, this is Felicia Day. I'm just adapting it because I love Felicia Day. Make your own goddamn shape to fit in. If you're a shape that doesn't fit in the circle, you don't fit in the triangle, you don't fit in the square, make a hole that you fit in, because you're worthy to be in there. You're worthy to be in the place that you're at. You already are enough. You deserve to sit there. You deserve to talk to this person. You deserve to be these people, not because of your accomplishments, not because you went to school or you didn't go to school, not because you have this life experience or you don't have this life experience. You simply existing is enough to show up. So treat yourself that way. Treat yourself like you deserve to be loved. Treat yourself like you deserve these things and these opportunities, because the world will not do it for you, but they will follow your lead.
Oh, girl. Dropping the truth and inspiration and empowerment. Oh my gosh, yes. I could sit and listen to you talk all day long. But I do have a couple questions that I like to ask all of my guests. So if you're ready, we're going to jump into that. What would be the best piece of advice that you would give a younger version of yourself who is in the thick of struggle if you had just a moment with them?
Probably similar to what I just said.
Yeah.
That it's okay to do things when they feel right for you, even when your brain is telling you that you don't deserve it. Ring the big bell.
Yeah, ring the bell. Love it. All right. And then my last and favorite question is, we like to talk about power on the podcast and not thinking of that as a bad thing. How would you think of, or how would you describe the type of power that you try to step into every day?
For me, my power is self-love. And if you listen to my podcast, I admit that I don't love myself. It is a journey to love myself. It is a privilege to love myself. And my power is each and every day smiling a little bit more at the person who's in the mirror, gracefully talking about her, knowing where I've come from in the depths of my despair, and knowing the depression that I have faced, both chemically and non-chemically, and being able to look at that person and say, damn, bitch, you can do this. And being able to visualize that higher self and know that not only am I becoming her, I'm already her. I am this person. I just need to make choices that reflect that, but I am my higher self. It doesn't matter what I look like. It doesn't matter what I sound like. It doesn't matter what I know in my head and what I don't. Showing up, making the kinder choice, not always the smartest choice, not always what people expect me. But for me, my highest self is a kind person who doesn't take shit. And so being able to make those choices that model that around my life, it's important. And so that's how I step in my power.
I love it. It's beautiful. Such great advice. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Sabrina, so much for being on the show today. I will make sure that I link all of your social media in the show notes, as well as a direct link to the Solving the Friendemic podcast. I really recommend you guys giving it a check that out. Give it a follow, give it a subscribe. Like I said before, every time I turn it on, I feel like I am in the room with you guys, and I'm like, yes, that is so true. And you make me feel like I'm part of your group, and I just think it's awesome. So, and I know you guys are doing amazing things, and there is so much more in your future. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. And I have to say, this is the first time I've recorded a podcast after starting a podcast that I have not started a show with, hey guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Welcome to Solving the Friendemic.
It's like I feel so honored. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
So
yes.
Thank you for having me. And it was a pleasure to spend time with you and listeners. And I just encourage you to show yourself some grace today. And if you can ring the big bell, manifest it, verbalize it, even if it's not in words, inside of your heart, and go after it.
Oh, awesome. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I want to thank my guests again for sharing their incredible story of transformation with us. I have linked their social medias below in the show notes so that you can give them a follow through their journey. Also, don't forget to check out the art that goes along with each week's episode at iempower.club. If you personally feel connected to the art and you would like to purchase a limited edition print that goes along with it as your own reminder to step into your power, you can do so at our website. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at IEmpowerClub, on TikTok at IEmpowerClub, and of course, YouTube at IEmpower. And don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss next week's episode of IEmpower. See you then.